2, 3.
What's up, everybody? This is Reconsidered, here for our 10th episode. Today we have Travis Cottle on, right? I'm saying your last name right?
That's right.
Cool. Travis and I, we met, even though it doesn't seem like it, I think we met almost 2 years ago.
Yeah.
When I first started coming up.
It was in the spring. You were wearing a...
Yeah.
Like an
you remember?
Yeah.
Oh, so describe what I was wearing. So Travis and I meet because Travis runs these open mics up at the Strand Theater in the Marietta Square. He also does a lot of event planning and stuff. I'm going to let him discuss that. But just playing open mics up there, I met Travis, and recently I asked him to come on the podcast. So
it's great to be here.
Yeah, we're excited for you to be here. Travis's topic today, just to kind of dabble on it a little bit, is moving to Nashville and reconsidering that decision. So real quick, let's get Travis to tell us a little about himself and like what all do you do at the Strand? Like, what do you do in your life, man?
Well, I run programs at the Strand, basically create events and shows that we do that are in-house, and I do that under a group called the Georgia Players Guild. And I also play piano there in the lounge, and I'm trying to be there every Friday night, but I also play piano for special events, and then I run a monthly open mic there. And just kind of want to start by saying that that whole process started with an open mic down the street. And so I ran an open mic with a guy named Chad Yoakum over at Johnny McCracken's, which is an Irish pub on the square. Yeah. I'm sure you're familiar with. And we ran it for a number of years and then quit doing the open mic over there. And when the Strand opened up a second floor lounge, which they call Lumiere, they wanted to start hosting events for that facility. And Cassie Kostulis, who is the director over at the Strand, reached out to me and Chad about starting an open mic. And that basically began the process that has become what I do now over there.
Awesome.
Starting with just a weekly open mic, and then they wanted to start having a piano event there on the weekends, and so I started playing piano there, and we had a lot of success with those events. And then after a year and a half of doing that, I approached Cassie about generating content for the theater, doing basically tribute shows. And so we started with one, and it was successful enough that we decided to do some more. And Cassie and I talked about taking some of the traditional Strand shows, like their Christmas show and the Motown show, and basically changing it from having a recorded track to having a live band. And so we did that this past year, and it was very successful and had a really wonderful response. And I got to bring some just tremendous friends that I've known for years into those projects. And that basically snowballed to where we are now, is where I have a concert series there. We're going to do 6 shows this year as the Georgia Players Guild, and just very excited about this year and all the projects that we have going on.
Yeah, personally, I'm excited about the Willie Nelson tribute show.
Me too. Willie is a hero of mine, and I've been a long-time Willie Nelson fan, and especially his live approach. When seeing Willie live is like seeing a great jazz band, but it's country music, and you have these fantastic soloists. You have a band that has been together for 40 plus years.
Which you don't ever see.
Yeah, same harp players, same bass player, same drummer, and just all legends in their own right. And so you see them do this incredible live show that sort of transcends what is already great work. And so I've been a fan for years, and it's just one of those voices that I've latched onto and have sung his songs many years. And so this is a personal show for me, and I'm very excited about it.
Cool. And that's
so as the Players Guild, though, you're actually in that band, And you're going to be performing the Willie Nelson tribute, or is that another band?
Yes. So the concept that we came with, that is Cassie and I, was to try to pair bands that had sort of common ground, but weren't necessarily the same. So the first one that we came up with was an Eagles Alabama tribute.
Wow.
And the idea is that both of them are crossover country artists. Eagles is obviously a crossover country folk rock artist, and Alabama was a crossover country pop artist. And Eagles are basically the West Coast. You have the West Coast style, and then Alabama is a very East Coast polished style. And so the show basically started with an Alabama set that showcased the East Coast crossover country music, and then the second half would be Eagles. And just really excited about kind of doing that unique approach to a tribute show. So this one with Willie Nelson is where you're taking someone who is an outlaw, the outlaw country movement that he was a part of in the 70s, and then you have a band that sort of epitomized the outlawness of the 60s folk revival. And so we're calling this Outlaws and Outlands. And
Nice.
that is Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young as just sort of the folk fighters of the 60s movement with the country fighter in the 70s movement in country music. So that's the bond that they share, all their different,
And
genres.
hearing this theme described makes it much more significant. I was just excited to go see it. Now I understand it more. It's awesome.
So under the Georgia Players Guild, those shows are going to be one of the 6 throughout this year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the Alabama Eagles crossover, the Willie Nelson show, and the Willie Nelson with, what's the other band again?
This one is Willie Nelson with Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young.
I actually saw them live. They opened up for Tom Petty. I got to, my buddy was like, hey, my uncle has tickets to the show, and seeing Tom Petty was awesome. And
Wow.
Yeah, Crosby, Stills, and Nash was just amazing, though. So.
And Tom Petty, he just puts on such a hell of a show.
Yeah.
All Mike's guitar tones, that must have been great. Yeah.
Where'd you see them?
I actually saw them at Phillips Arena, and we got to sit up in the box seats.
That's a cool spot.
Yeah, it was unreal.
Well, cool. So did I describe your topic correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Which could be.
Well, first of all, I meant to do this at the beginning. I feel like I messed up. Right here to my left, this is Ethan.
What's up, guys?
Eloquin.
Yeah, I mean, we're co-hosts, so they definitely know who I am, but we didn't do any of the introduction.
We didn't do any introduction stuff, so I'm going to kind of do that a little bit.
Let's move from the prelude part, though, into the topic.
Yeah, that's what I want to do.
So let's reconsider moving to Nashville, and I know that you said you have a whole kind of story that leads up into the essential punchline of why people should reconsider moving to Nashville.
Yes. I got to play for a while with a group called the Martans, and they're a local sort of Memphis R&B soul throwback group, and they had for a while a percussionist playing with them named Count Mbutu. And
Can you say his name one more time again?
Count Mbutu. And he's just an Atlanta percussion legend. He's just a monster conga player. He was with Derek Trucks for a very long time and saw the full kind of emergence of his band with Susan Tedeschi, and then basically was getting ready for retirement. And I got to see him the last year before he went to Argentina. Argentina government actually set him up to come down and retire down there and basically be employed by the government to do master classes and play down there. And he still comes up here, now and then, but I got to hang out with him a little bit and just ask him a ton of questions about Atlanta. And he talked about kind of growing up here in the 60s and 70s. And he said if you were a musician in that time, you could work 7 nights a week. You could be mediocre and work 7 nights a week. And it's just basically just a golden time. And in fact, I think you can make like $100 a night, which is very similar to what a lot of places you could make now. And
at the time, $100 was a lot more.
But it was a whole lot more, exactly. And basically bands in that era, they would go out and play, if they had songs on the radio, but a band typically did not tour. You basically stayed in town and you had the venues that you played at and did what you did. And when the DJ movement came into Atlanta, and especially when disco became popular, you just saw a lot less of that. And it became to a point where a band as a model needed to tour. And so you'd have these national acts where you had bands that were not necessarily on a label, or they were on a smaller label, and they were basically making a living by touring around and doing what have you. And that just sort of became the new model, and that's certainly what I'm sure you and I have experienced. I know that I've had my share of bands where I went on the road and schlepped around in a van and did what we can. and basically I have found, kind of as I make my own way in this city, that I've just had the fortune of hanging out with some really wonderful singer-songwriters. And there's this pattern where each one of them will get to a certain point where they've basically worked to create an album. And once they get that album, they start promoting the album, and then they do a fair amount of touring, and then it just seems the logical next step for each one of those people is, if I really want to make it, I need to move to Nashville. And I find that each time that happens, and it's not necessarily that that's a wrong decision for anyone to make, and I don't want to just sway anyone from making what they feel like is a great decision, because a lot of people have had success doing that, but you're always leaving a void in the community that you're leaving behind, and sometimes it doesn't work out in a manner that you think it would. And so I've just had friends that will build up a community and they have a following, and with that following comes the support of the places that you're playing at and creation of new opportunities and what have you. And when that happens, is if you leave and move to a new town, a lot of times it's not like you're replaced and someone else just carries the momentum. A lot of times a scene will kind of crumble in on itself, and powerful enigmatic figures have that kind of effect on a community. And I think that there was just an older model at one point where the focus was not on creating an album, but it was on creating a single. And you had a lot more local radio. And I would just love to see a period of time, and maybe a podcast is the answer, in terms of people getting access to local content, where you're focused on creating singular songs and connecting the local market with those songs. I have this kind of personal dream that we could have, like a local Marietta radio station, and that you have enough corporate funding that you start tagging the people that are in this area by saying, we're going to bring you in to generate one song, and then we're going to put it on our station. And then, when you're in the Marietta area, you can listen to our station, and these are all the 50, 60, 100, 200, 500 people
That's such a good idea.
that are connected to that area. But it can work monetarily because you're generating singles. You're not trying to create a whole album because you're taking it to this next step, and then you're going to move to Nashville when it all works out. So,
and you talk about how people living in Atlanta, they create this name for themselves just inside the city, and they create this movement, and it's almost like a scene, like you describe it. And then, like you said, they get up and go to Nashville because they think that's the next best step. And they don't really develop that anymore in Nashville. And like you said, they leave like a scene just to kind of crash. But I feel like you shouldn't move to Nashville for sure, because you are making a scene happen. And that's what I've seen so far, ever since I've got to know who you were and stuff. I think that you, and I was just telling Lauren this earlier, I think that you are starting to see it's like a really awesome community in Marietta. And I can see you at the head of that as far as, putting on things at the Strand and music-wise, I guess I would say, for lack of better terms. But I see you doing this, and so it would be very ironic if you did move to Nashville.
I have a question for you, Riley, real quick. How long have you been going to the Strand? Like 2 years? Is that when you met Travis?
Yeah, 2 years. Yeah.
So I just saw you the other night, Riley, at the open mic, and I actually met Travis for a second. And you played with our other buddy, Kyle, who was on our 4th episode. And what I saw there I saw all these different artists, and everybody had their unique characters, right? Their unique acts, and everybody that was there was an artist. And I thought that it was so cool to see this coming together of just a group of people who enjoyed to hear original sounds, original music. And I think that everybody really had like deep meanings to their songs, right? Yeah. They really, sorry to be cliche, but poured their heart and soul into what they were making. And I really, like, there was some real talent in there. Like the first guy that I saw, I think his name was Zach, but he was an amazing singer.
Yeah, he was good.
He blew me away. Like, he should be on like a larger stage,
He was nailing the falsetto.
Yeah, he was. He really was good at the falsetto. But and then there was this other older couple that got up there, and we had to essentially kick them off because they were having so much fun. And they were really good too, and I enjoyed the energy that they brought, and just like the pure happiness that lady had up there was.
But seriously, all of that wouldn't have happened without Travis and the people behind him doing that, and that's what I mean by you're creating the scene, and I feel like personally when I go up to the Strand every first Thursday, I feel like I'm a part of that just for that night. So
definitely,
and it makes me feel amazing, and gives me hope that can be a part of my life too,
right? And like you said, it's creating these new opportunities.
Yeah,
Kyle,
bringing people together.
Kyle came and he met other artists that he might go work with too.
Yeah, that he linked up with. So,
what's interesting is that none of that necessarily happens quickly. Like the older couple that you're talking about, like basically it takes time and patience to build a scene. And the older couple you're referring to, which is Mark and Donna, they used to come to my open mic at McCracken's. It's not like they just randomly came in. And a lot of these people, we've all sort of fostered relationships together. And as we've stayed together, we've kind of shouldered each other. And so they've been as encouraging to me as I have been to them and a lot of these people. And then, in a sense, it becomes like family. Mm-hmm. And that's when that's when the engine's humming, so to speak, is that you have all of these strangers that are meeting at these different points. And then at some point, some of those people really make a connection that's strong enough that will bring them back. Mm-hmm. And then if you are just patient with that and then just keep going year after year, it's almost kind of like a what fire does to a metal, and it just pulls all of the right things closer together, and it just bonds something stronger, and that's something that people instantly can connect to, and it's really the sort of thing that changes people's lives for the better.
And when that bond is strong, people that are new to it automatically see it. They see it faster than maybe it was in the beginning stages, but like you said, once the metal's hotter, when they touched it before, it wasn't as hot, but then they touched it again, it was hot. That was a bad analogy.
And well, that's
it wasn't as good as Travis's.
That's what I was noticing, though, right?
Yeah, because you saw that bond as soon as you walked into
exactly.
it.
Everybody there, like I said, was an artist, and they were there to support each other. And what's cool is that each artist brings a couple of their friends each week, right? So more and more people see it. More and more people get interested in it, and then they tell their friends who are artists, and like, oh, check out this open mic, and that's how that community grows. Yeah. And I love how you were talking about people who think that they're going to make it to that next step, so they move to Nashville, and they're leaving behind this void, and they may not recreate that in Nashville because there's so much competition up there, but like what they have here in Atlanta has become something that's a bond that's sacred, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why I think it's important to be a musician for the right reasons too.
And I've had some friends, I've had some friends who were incredibly successful here, and then they moved to Nashville and found that family up there, and they're bonded, and they're having great, relationships, and it's certainly, for some people the absolute right decision, and it works out great. But it doesn't necessarily need to be the logical next step, because I just think that there's a cyclical effect that happens not only in music and culture but also communities, and I see a lot of new bars and venues and places opening, and Duluth has Red Clay Theater that they've had for a handful of years, and I mean that was an unheard of thing to have someone like Eddie and Shalom up there, and now that community's thriving and has that space, and we're seeing the same sort of things in Marietta and different parts of Atlanta. And I'd like to think that, as long as you have people that believe in this area and want to be community growers, that you're going to create more bars and venues and places to play. And the end result of that is, people creating art that are looking around them. You know what I mean? So if you live in Marietta and you're looking at the things that people are affected by, that people like, that people dislike, your art's going to reflect that. And if you're in that community long enough, it's going to affect the people around you. That's in a good, it's in a good way where you can see things in ways that people don't see things.
That's a good point. And one fortunate thing about living in Atlanta is that you can kind of balance going to Nashville and then coming back to Atlanta, and you can just book yourself, some open mics if you really want to go to Nashville, and just book yourself some open mics up there on a weekend or something. And that's the beautiful thing about living in Atlanta. And then you can come back and continue your movement here.
Yeah, you don't have to move everywhere.
Right, you don't have to, yeah. I mean, I would understand that thought if you lived, like in San Antonio or Dallas rather, and and you wanted to come out east more. But I mean, if you live in Atlanta, you can just make a weekend trip up to Nashville. That's something I would love to do, personally.
I have a question. So we talked about that void that's left when a band moves to Nashville, but what about when a band goes on tour? The scene. How long does it take for that scene to crumble while they're on tour? If they're gone for 4 or 5 months, right? Is it still going to be there when they get back? How have things changed?
Just talked to a friend yesterday who was a trumpet player in a big corporate band, and he was saying to me on the phone that he's looking to scale back playing with the band, because you do that for so many years and then you come back home and you feel totally disconnected, and also no one thinks to call because you were never available to begin with. And so a lot of times a lot of these guys look at these great opportunities and they'll do it for a while, then after a while they come back and they feel like they've almost don't have a home, and so they try to strike some balance. And that's a tough thing about being a road musician, especially if it's a band that's not necessarily life-sustaining, or there's always this question of where's this going. It's a very tough call, to continue, but also at the same time realizing that you're not growing those relationships at home and being a part of that scene. It's a tough line to figure out how to strike a balance. And I've had lots of friends who have struggled with how much, but also at the same time, at the end of the day, you're trying to make the best living you can. And so if you get that right opportunity, you usually, go out and do it. I guess to kind of go back to the original story I was saying about Kanambutu is that I feel like we're hitting the other side of that curve where you can stay home and start to build those places that are around you and create your own scene. And that has sort of been my hope. When I did my undergrad, it was in classical music and it was in Virginia. And it was all done under the model that you win a job out somewhere, and so the idea is that someone has already done all the legwork for you and this thing exists, and then they'll have an opening and then you audition and win the opening. And no one stopped me at some point and said, why don't you create your own opening? Like, why don't you create your own scene? Why don't you create the opportunity? And if you think that way, it's no longer about you, because you need all these other people to do that. So instead of going out and trying to fill a void in someone else's scene, if you can create your own scene, then you're going to have 10 people around you that you're going to be creating work for and opportunities. It's such a beautiful marriage, and it took me a long time to even figure out that was possible.
Yeah. That's amazing. It's actually a much more sustainable model as a musician than the whole get on tour, go around, and then when you come back, you have no more solid relationships with anybody because you haven't been growing with them over the past couple of years.
Yeah.
Whereas if you build that scene around you and you focus on making Atlanta better, or even that pocket inside of Atlanta better, and opening up these opportunities for people, right? It helps you grow. You grow with them, and then it can always be there. There will always be more people that can join your family, right? And people will come and go, but you have this common set, this common place, this location where people can always come to and build.
Yeah, and then I think you'll find out how small the world actually is, and you'll start to realize how many mutual friends you have. And then even if you had 10 people around you, that's like knowing 100 people, so to speak. And so
because of all the people
they know, and as long as you're moving towards that, as long as you're keeping that momentum going, then the people are gonna, the people that they know are gonna find out about everything you're doing, and then that's how it grows. That's the process. That's the step by step. And so it's as simple as that to say, but like you pointed out earlier, it's patience is a key. And that I know how that sounds to say, but patience is a key because it's almost inevitable. If you have patience towards something, it's going to happen.
Yeah, you keep acting towards it.
Right, and each thing that you try to do has its own time process that it takes. Some things take a week, some things take 2 years, but then you start to notice it, and then it makes you not want to give up at all. And then you
won't even ever think about giving up, right?
Yeah, you'll never
you're just doing it, and you're enjoying it, and you're loving it, and you've got that family.
Yeah, and you'll see what has happened in your wave.
That would be much more of a fulfilling life, I think, as a musician than just hitting it big for 2 years of your life and then coming home and being like, well, I don't have any connections down here anymore. Where am I going to play? Do I have to just go get another job?
Yeah, because you made a good point. Being there for your community is so much more significant as opposed to just trying to conquer the entire United States at once.
And doing it for yourself.
Yeah, because I feel like if you conquer your local area, the rest, like I just said, will come along, and however big what you're trying to do will be how big it will be, if that makes any sense,
Right.
And you will conquer the entire United States if it's meant to be. And without even just trying, you just try in your own hometown, and then you don't even have to, try everywhere else because it just kind of spread and that kind of stuff. And we live in a great area to do that too.
I have a couple questions for you. I want to go back to just focusing on this project that you've been working on for a couple of years. When did you start open mic, and why did you start it?
Oh, well, it's funny. I went to school for classical music, but as a kid, I had one failed band after the other and was writing songs constantly. And I don't know. I think maybe halfway through high school, I had it in my head that it was not going to all work out, but I wanted to do music for a living. So I just focused on classical music, and I went and got a classical degree, and I came back and I did that for good 10 years or something. And then my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, we went to a friend of theirs' house, and I watched this older man pull out a Martin D28 and for 4 hours play every song that anyone asked him to play. And I walked away from that party, and I looked at her, and I was like, I'm not a real musician, and I don't even know half the songs that I love, and I don't know how to play them. And so I made this determination that I was going to go find a local open mic, and each week I was going to take 5 songs that were important to me, songs that I loved, and learn them. That what are the songs I don't know that I love, and some of them were not even really appropriate to play on a guitar, and sing. Jerry was a race car driver. Doesn't really work, singing and playing guitar. But damn it, I tried it, and I did that. I did that. My wife and I didn't have any kids at the time, so we went faithfully for a number of years. This is a very long process. We went for a number of years, and was such a regular that it was just the most logical choice a guy who became a very close friend when he left to give me the open mic, and that's basically how it happened. And I've just sort of made that pledge to myself, ever since that, as a musician, you're a communicator of the things that you love and that matter to you and the world around you. And if you distance yourself from that in any way, then you've sort of lost sight of the point. And so, I've spun a lot of platitudes in my life, because I thought it would take me to a place that I thought that I wanted to be. And maybe that kind of brings me back to the whole thing about Nashville, is that, for a lot of people that is a dream and that's a great, but for a lot of people it also thinks it's going to be a vehicle to take them where they want to go. And I'm just here to say you can do that where you are. Mm-hmm. And that was certainly more of a model maybe 50 years ago than it is now, but that doesn't mean it can't change. And I've sort of pledged that to myself ever since.
It reminds me of Tripp's episode when he talked about how faith is not a destination, it's more about just the journey. Mm-hmm. And how if you're a musician, it's not about taking you somewhere, it's about being where you are fully in the moment, right? And playing what matters to you in that moment, right? And no matter what art you're creating, even in our podcast, right? Like, people have asked me, what's our end goal with this? And it's like, it's not about that, right? I enjoy doing every single episode and learning from our guests, right? Just every episode I come away feeling just happier as a person, like I've learned something. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and the real point of even doing a podcast or playing an open mic or whatever is, for that moment and for that feeling, like Ethan just said, that kind of high, I guess you described it, that you get when you walk away, and you just want to keep striving for that, and you also know in the back of your mind that you're doing good and you're possibly helping people, and then just,
right. Like,
more significant.
For example, if you're a musician, and I said this to Riley, he played at a different open mic a couple weeks ago, he gave me goosebumps, and he was like, that's what I want to do, right? If you're giving people goosebumps as a musician, that's got to be the most rewarding thing ever. I mean, have you experienced that before?
Oh,
yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks, Ethan.
Yeah, man. I'll tell you it all the time if you ever need a little.
I'm trying to deflate my head right now.
Okay, so we talked about why you started it, and kind of how it's progressed and where you are now with it. And even though we just talked about how the end goal doesn't matter, I do want to know what are your future kind of aspirations for the open mic and the projects that you have going at the Strand right now?
Honestly, my next step is I really want to have local radio, and then I want to be in a position where I'm helping put people that want to finance local art with the people that are creating that art. And then getting on the radio, and creating, just basically helping facilitate those opportunities for people I'm coming in contact with.
Do you have any plans so far as to how you want to accomplish that and bring about a local radio station? I'm assuming that would be like an AM station, obviously. I mean, to start out,
right? FM. No, I think it would be FM.
Right. Well, is AM easier to get on than FM, or is that just? Is that more of a local?
Well, it might not be FM or AM. It could be an internet thing.
Yes, that would be better, right? Okay. So Riley, AM is for long distance, right? That's what it's for. So FM is just for local, right? So anyway. But no, an internet radio station would be awesome, right?
I just learned something.
And people could essentially stream it from wherever, whenever, right?
Like through an app, I guess, or
an app would be a great idea.
Stream that through iHeartRadio or even
YouTube
even
Live. You could do YouTube Live. There's tons of different ways that you could do it through.
Yeah,
but that's definitely totally doable. Right, I think you already have half the stuff you need. A couple microphones and
absolutely
and the internet.
So it's just a matter of bringing the idea up to whoever you think that appropriate person would be, and where would your ideal place be that you would want to record the radio station? If once it starts and everything, would you want it to be in the square, or would you want?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that would make more sense, right?
That would be so cool.
Yeah, my wife and I. It's funny. We used to live on Virginia Avenue downtown,
right?
And we were renting half of a duplex, and we had this crazy cat named Mr. C, and it was my wife's cat before we met.
Mr. C.
Yeah, Mr. C. And it was chunky, but I called him Mr. C. So we had a more formal relationship because I was coming in late in the game, and so we knew that we wanted to have children, and we were getting married, and we just trying to figure out where we're going to live. And most of my family and her family lived far north of Atlanta, and we just felt like if we're looking at the pockets and what we could afford, and we just really looked around, and it just seemed like if we moved downtown or on the east side of town that we would just be ostracizing ourselves from family. And so we kind of hunted around this area and then rented a place on the square, off the square on Virginia Avenue. Just fell in love with it. And so I just really proud to be living in this area, and I think that it's just filled with really wonderful people, and a lot of them are thinking the same way that I am, and are constantly thinking, how do we grow this? How do we, and restaurateurs and people of all walks of life. How do we grow this community? How do we make it stronger? How do we make it more interesting? And so I feel like I'm kind of in a cool sort of.
It's a great spot for you to be in.
That's already a good basis of content for your radio show, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't just have to be music. It can be podcasts, interviews, things like that. So you can bring in your restaurateurs from around town, people who have the vintage antique shops. Like, I love those places. Those people are super interesting. And, it could just be, where you broadcast out to the world, like, hey, come check out Marietta, check out all the cool things that we're doing, right? And then it becomes more than just about you and your immediate circle and what you're doing with the Strand and music in general, but it becomes a positive for everybody.
We tried to launch. I had two other friends, and we tried to launch something about a year ago. And I think that when you actually try to do something, you sort of realize what your limitations are when you actually have to follow through with it. And so we knew that we wanted to do something for the community that was something like a radio station, and we started to put it all together. And I think we all realized that we just did not have the infrastructure at the time. And so that's allowed me to look at what needs to grow to get those sort of things off the ground. And so this is certainly a huge part of that, because with each one of these tribute shows, I'm basically strengthening a core group of musicians, and also bringing in graphic artists and a lot of people that I haven't necessarily had to lean on, and that's essentially creating us infrastructure to take that next step when it's appropriate and we could do it strong. So
you're gaining the means to do what you couldn't do a year ago, and that involves patience again.
Yeah.
I think the biggest infrastructure tool is actually the people, right? Enough people to keep a radio station running 12, 14, 16 hours a day with content. And what's cool about a radio station is that whether or not you record it, typically you don't record a radio station, so you can kind of say the same things over and over again after a while, play the similar songs, for a couple weeks, make a couple announcements about, the sale that the restaurant's having, or, the special that they're having, a couple times a day or whatever. So you don't have to continually 100% be creating original content, but there are a lot of cool stuff that you can do.
Bringing the community together, I mean, that's real. That's a real thing that you would accomplish right off the bat.
Yeah, and I know people that would love to, take an hour chunk out of that time just to talk about sports. That would get on and talk about, even if it was local.
I know
sports,
I do.
Well, that would be a cool thing about having a radio station is you're not limited to one segment. You can have, you're working 14 hours a day, so you spread up that 14 hours into 14 different segments if you wanted each hour,
Yeah, or 2-hour segments.
Sports, local restaurants, local bands, and I really liked your idea. I hope you pursue it too. The idea of having like the single song, doing like singles, having a song from like a local band come on.
Or even solo acts, because a lot of guys are artists, in bands, but they also have their own songs, like you, Riley.
Yeah.
We all have this, all musicians have this romance with the album, because we all grew up with these just albums that just hit us like a brick, and stand as albums. And so that's always the goal. And it's hard to... it's hard, I think, for a lot of people. That's not necessarily their path or call. You take like Willie Nelson, for instance, who was just writing these fantastic songs that were all singles, and he didn't start his career with The Red-Headed Stranger, which was the first monumental, concept album in country music, and then everything that he has sort of done since has, in a way, followed that model. That's not how his career started, and so it started with singles, and I think that for a lot of people, that's the avenue. They just don't know it.
And using singles as stepping stones to get to that big album or to that big tour.
I love how you're always talking about models, right? Because I'm somewhat of a businessman, so I always think about business models. But you're looking at music. There's a business model for how you approach the way that you create music and share it with the world. So I really like that aspect too. Do you have any remarks, Riley?
I don't want to sound cliche. I'll let Travis go first. I do have some remarks, but do you have any closing remarks or anything you want to say? Like anything you want to promote about the Strand or?
Well, we have our next show coming up, which is February 17th, the Willie Nelson, Crosby, Stills, Nash, Young & show. That's going to be 8 o'clock at downtown Marietta.
That's a Friday.
I think this is awesome what you guys are doing, and it's sort of exactly in line with kind of what I'm thinking, and I'm just really honored to be a part of this and to get to hang out with you guys some more.
We're honored to have you here.
Well, bring us on the radio station too.
I love it. Let's do this.
And one thing I got out of this just to say is a reminder: if you're overthinking about something that you want to accomplish, look closer in your surroundings for the answer, and don't try to look so far away, because personally that's where I've gone wrong too, is trying to look too far into where's my answer. What I got out of this episode was, it's kind of like saying, the harder you look, the less you see, and that's the same with the harder you try, the less you'll get. I mean, that's kind of what I got out of it. That's not necessarily 100% true, but it is in a sense that, if you try to more close in your circle, your circle will get bigger.
Right.
So you stretch your arms out and then you just keep spinning and your circle's going to get bigger. So don't try to start way down the road where you're not ready for.
Right.
That was a similar message that I was actually going to say, but you said it more beautifully than I could have. I'm so sorry.
I didn't. Well,
I loved it. Thank you.
And so this has been a great 10th episode. Thank you, Travis, for coming on.
Thank you, guys.
You're definitely going to be back on again. And real quick, I wanted to thank Malvin also. Malvin ran audio for us this time. Sounded so much better. We feel a lot more legit. We probably sound a lot more legit compared to all of our other episodes, if you have heard those.
It's a big step for us, though, right?
It's a huge step.
We started as amateurs. This is our next step to a little bit more professionalism.
Yeah.
We've got a new marketing guy on our team.
Yeah.
His name is also Travis. Ironically, our guest today is also Travis. So a bunch of Travises around here. It's a good name, good people.
Great name.
Yeah.
So shout out to Travis Steele. Thanks for sitting in today.
And I would say
thanks to Malvin. We really appreciate you volunteering and stepping up to do this, and his wife Lauren for sitting in and enjoying this episode.
Thanks, Lauren. Lauren's right behind me. No, I like this, man. I think that we have a little small movement going.
Well, yeah, it's
it started
awesome
out as an idea, and then look, we're
as you brought this up in the episode,
in a room.
We're doing it now too.
Right. Exactly.
So, couldn't have had a better 10th episode.
Just go for your goals.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Travis. Appreciate you.
Took a trip northeast to see all the places you live. Passing by your brothers, Long Island was not as I imagined it. I know that you miss home like I do, and I've been the same since we left. I know your family's changed with the scenery, but when you're back here, it's hard to be alone. Next stop we went down to the city where you were born. It was your first job, now a hookah store, a metaphor for all we've known. I know that you miss home like I do. I've been the same since we left. I know your family's changed with the scenery, but when you're back here, it's hard